I intended to create a Crucible melee only build using the Crucible action skill, but it was actual grade A Garbanzo and it just was not working at all. There was hardly any damage and it was just terrible. Like, you can't have a build that doesn't involve guns as far as I'm aware, because it just doesn't seem to work. So what we have here is a infinite berserk build, but we're using the class mod that we intended for the original build. So this one's actually a disgustingly good accidental creation. So basically this wasn't the intention, but it's turned out really goddamn well. So permanent berserk, insane durability, pretty much immortality to be honest. I don't think I've went down once using this build, and you get frequent immunity procs as well, so it's just absolutely fantastic. Everything you need to know about this one. Drop a like if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new here, and let's just get into the details here. So we'll start with the specializations. So you need about 51 points if you want everything that I have here. If you don't have that many, you could probably get away with 3 perks and then your 4th perk of choice. So first of all, you want to put 20 points into Runner for movement speed and melee damage, and that's to allow you to get the Bare Arms perk, allowing melee damage to benefit from increases to gun damage at 50% effectiveness, and Groundbreaker, which is still a really goddamn good skill, especially for anything involving melee damage. So gun, action skill, and ordnance is stored, and when you do a melee attack or a slam, the stored damage is consumed and applied to that attack at 20% as well for 5 seconds. So absolutely brilliant 2 skills those are. And the third one, you need to put 10 points into Sharpshooter and 1 point into Daredevil to get this one to unlock. Now with caffeine, so action skill cooldown being reduced whenever a rep kit's activated, so whenever it's on cooldown, we're going to get a little bit of that cooldown back when we use our rep kit, which is really nice. And finally, if you've got the 51 points, put 20 into Survivor here for maximum health and shields, and that's to allow you to get the best defense, which will increase your damage dealt based on your maximum health or shield. In this case, it's our shield that's higher, so 30% damage when our shield is full, which it most likely will be because we get a lot of overshield with this build as well. And that's the specializations. You could probably swap this one out. Like I said, if you don't have the 51, just swap this one out. So we'll touch on these skills now, but before we do that, so the intention here is you're going to be permanently maintaining your Berserk status for massive increased damage, and you're going to restore your Forge skill on melee attack, which basically just allows you to permanently refresh the Berserk as well, so it'll just be constantly getting reactivated and it will never run out. The only way that this actually works is with the class mod that gives bonus points into Fists of Stone, so we'll explain that when we get to the gear section. But for the skills, so we've got 44 points into Calamity and 5 points into Vengeance. So the 5 points into Vengeance first are just in Battleborn here. Increased gun damage when we're at full health, and it's doubled at maximum health, so 40% gun damage when we're full health, really nice. The rest of the points, like I said, in Calamity, so the first 3 we've got into Impetus, so a kill skill. When we kill, we're going to gain increased shield regeneration rate and movement speed for a duration, 15% shield regen and 9% movement speed, so 45% regen and 27 movement speed at maximum stacks. I'm not sure how the shield regen works with armor shields. I don't know if it just makes the chunks recharge faster, because obviously the shield's not regenerating, it's just it works a wee bit differently, so not sure on that one. Comment down below if you know how that interaction works. Next up, we've got 2 points into Discombobulate, so 10% melee critical hit chance. There's going to be a lot of melee damage in this build. Well, it's not a melee build per se, the crit chance really helps out here. We've got 5 points into Heavy Plate, so increased maximum shield capacity just for durability, and maximum overshield capacity increased as well, so 35% max shield and 45% max overshield. That will take the overshield capacity up to about 11,000, which is just really damn nice. We've got 5 points into Tritanium Knuckles, so increased melee damage and skill damage. We are going to be dealing a lot of melee damage, and our skill, our Forge skill, will benefit from the increase to skill damage, so 40% melee damage and 20% skill damage there. Excellent 5 points. We've got 1 point into Forge and Steel, so this one's really good. I wouldn't normally take this, but with this build it's going to be proccing pretty damn often. I don't think it has a cooldown, so it'll be activating pretty much every time we use our Forge skill, which will be pretty often, as you can see from the gameplay in the background. So 6-second immunity every time we activate that, and it's just excellent because it's going to make us like impervious to damage, which is just fantastic. We've got 5 points into the best defense, so we're going to gain overshield when we deal melee damage. Like I said, a lot of melee damage is going to be coming out of this one. and 15% of that is going to be converted to overshield, so we're just going to be overshielded all the time. For the augment, we're taking Force of Nature, so you can probably swap this one out, but I find it is actually quite useful. So it's not a detonation build either, but our class mod will give us bonus detonation damage, so that's why we've chosen this one. Well, we've got our action skill up. Gun damage is going to prime enemies for a detonation, and they will detonate when they either die or are hit by the forge skill. Most likely it will be the forge skill in this case, which will deal incendiary damage to nearby enemies. And if we detonate it with a melee attack, it's going to deal 50% of the damage. We've got most of our points into the left-hand tree here, so we're only putting 1 point into Berserk. And that's just because we want to be able to trigger it. So the scaling on this one's actually really bad. So we don't want to put 5 points in there just for the 30% at maximum stacks. So 6% is absolutely fine. The rest comes from the follow-up skill. So just 1 point in here just to trigger the effect when we activate our forge skill. The other 4 points we've got into Bloodlust here. So whenever our shield breaks, we're going to gain Bloodlust, which will give us reload speed and lifesteal. So 24% reload speed and 12% lifesteal for the 4 points, and it will also trigger when we activate our action skill as well, which is just a nice wee bonus, and that's for 8 seconds. The follow-up skill to the Berserk there is only red. We've got 3 points in here, so this is where all the scaling comes from. So whenever we kill while we're Berserk, we're going to gain a stack, so a maximum of 10 stacks, which is 60% per stack for a maximum of 600% cryo damage on our guns and our melee. And we're going to constantly refresh this by reactivating our forge skill, so this is where all the damage is mostly coming from. We've got 2 points into Brim and Vigor. We're going to get increased maximum health capacity and melee damage when we're full health, so like I said, our overshield's going to be taking most of the damage, so this should be active quite a lot of the time. 14% max health and 14% melee damage while we're nice and healthy. And for our capstone, we're taking Horde Cleave, so this is obviously going to replace the base skill. I was using the green one for ages and I realised that I can actually switch to the red, so this one is actually really goddamn good. So we're going to swing an axe, launches a forge wave that deals cryo melee damage and freezes everyone that it passes through, and additionally to that it's going to cause a detonation, so that will scale from our class mod as well, and it's a 55-second cooldown. The rest of our skill points are in the right hand tree, so we've got Dragon's Breath, so whenever we activate our ordnance, our next gunshot is converted to incendiary, which will stagger and deal double damage. So for the 5 points, it's double damage at 100%. We've got 3 points into Judgment, so increase melee damage to enemies below 50% HP. So for the 3 points, we're getting 30%, so just a nice little bonus there. And this is the key skill, so this is how it all works. It all revolves around this basically. So Fists of Stone, we've got 4 bonus from the class mod. Whenever we deal melee damage, we're going to restore a percentage of the forge skill cooldown. So any instance of melee damage have a chance to restore. So it says melee attacks double the effect, so that's 18% on the melee attack, but melee damage is only 9%, so I think that's when you actually press the melee button it's going to be 18%, but otherwise it's 9%. Either way, basically the gun that we're going to be using and our grenade is going to deal melee damage, so it's going to reduce the cooldown of our forge skill massively and allow us to just constantly use it pretty much. So that's, it all revolves around this Fist of Stone, and that comes from the class mod as well. And that wraps up the skills there, so this is where it all comes from, Fists of Stone, and we'll jump into the gear that you're going to need to make this one work now. So for the gear, you don't need a huge amount for this to work. You technically only need 1 gun. We have chosen 2 though, just for a little bit of variability and to trigger the bonus damage from Dragon's Breath. So we've chosen a sniper for that purpose, but for the main gun it's the Mantra. So obviously because we're doing a lot of melee damage here and we want to trigger Fists of Stone, this one just really helps out with that absolutely massively. It's pretty much essential, you can't get away with not using this. So this obviously drops from Bloom Reaper, so you'll need to have a pretty substantial build and you'll need to have killed Bloom Reaper in the first place to get this. So Bloom Reaper can obviously be found in the Bloom. So the Bloom is on the far left hand side of Carcadia and Tunage Peel, down here in the southern section of the area. So obviously he's the raid boss, so like I said, you'll need a pretty strong build for this one. It's got a 27% chance to drop on Ultimate Vault Hunter 6, so actually quite high if you can kill him on Ultimate Vault Hunter 6 of course. On Ultimate Vault Hunter 1 or every level below Ultimate Vault Hunter 6 is a 1.15% chance lower for it to drop. If he's on Big Encore, which I've never seen Bloom Reaper on Big Encore, it's a 37% chance for that one, so but good luck fighting him on bloody Big Encore mode, that would be absolute hellish. That's where you can find the mantra. The second gun we've chosen is the truck, and like I said, this is just to trigger the bonus damage from Dragon's Breath. So the reason we've chosen this is got increased crit damage and really high base damage. And for this one, you can actually find this on the Bio Omega Thresher. So the Bio Omega Thresher can be found in the Fades district of Dominion City, and it's just over here on the map in this kind of watery pit area. He's quite an annoying boss. Again, he's a Thresher, so you like to spend a lot of time underground, but that's who you're going to want to go and kill for the truck. You can use any alternative weapon that's just got high damage, so we're just triggering this with Dragon's Breath just to do massive increased damage on a singular shot weapon. So the Slugger could be good, or any other sniper with high damage. And that's all the guns you're going to need. Alternatively, to deal with armored targets or high shielded targets, I mean, our mantra here, the primary one, has radiation damage, which is really good against shields. If it doesn't come in that element, or you need a different element, you can try get 2 of these if possible. We've actually got one in corrosive and cryo as well, but if you can't get a second one that suits the elemental damage for dealing with armor, just use anything else really. So we've got a Maliwan orb weapon with cryo and shock, which is really good for dealing with those types of health. So it just really depends what your mantra drops in, but alternatively to that, just use anything that's really good against armor, so any sort of acid weapon, and you're absolutely fine with that one. The main component of your actual gear though you're going to need is the Viking class mod. So this one it's just really weird in that we're not actually using the class mod for its intended purpose. The design around this is obviously revolving around Crucible, but we're not even touching that, so we're kind of wasting the effect there. So doesn't really matter though, because this, like I said, this is an accidental creation. So for the class mod itself, we're getting the 4 points into Fists of Stone, which is what makes this work. The 2 other bonus points there are in the green tree. We're getting 1 point into reactive armor, so detonations restore shield and ordnance cooldown, and 2 points into cacophony, which is increased ordnance damage and detonation radius. So they're okay, they're pretty good bonuses, but we're not too fussed about that. The 4 points into Fists of Stone are what really make this work though, so you really need the bonus points in there for this one to work. For this one's giving us 60% detonation damage, I believe that's the locked stat, and 60% action skill damage we've got on this one. So this one actually drops from Callus the Ripper Queen. So Callus the Ripper Queen can be found in the Moon-Called Throne up here in the Fallen Crown of Carcadia. Again, she's a story boss, so you just make your way through the fortress there to kill her. It has a 11.2% chance to drop on Ultimate Vault Hunter 6 as Amon, or a 22.5% chance if you play Big Encore. Again, because it's an Amon class mod, don't farm it on anyone else because the drop chance is just horrendously low, so you do want to farm this one on Amon, and you're looking for the 4 points into Fists of Stone if you can get that, of course. For our rep kit, you can literally have anything here, it doesn't actually matter. We've got the triple bypass with movement speed, so just anything that complements the build, so there's not any actual requirement with this one, so you're open to choose whatever you want. For the grenades, we've chosen Slippy, so this one obviously deals melee damage, and this one that we have comes with the nuke trait, which increases its damage by 31% and its radius by 62% at the cost of an increased cooldown, but it's still got the 2 charges, which is really nice. So this one you can find on Shadow Pelt. Shadow Pelt can obviously be found in the Cuspid Climb of Terminus, so we're actually at him right now, we were just farming him, but it's the Whistler's Maw Auger Mine right here on the map, and you just go through the Auger Mine and kill Shadow Pelt for that one. Bit of an annoying boss on Ultimate Vault Hunter 6 because the shield constantly recharging, so you do need a good way to deal with that, and it's got a 21% chance on Ultimate Vault Hunter 6, or 30% if he's on Big Encore. For the shield, so we've just chosen the Onion. So again, I keep using the Onion in build guides, it's just a really goddamn good shield, and the reason for that is, one, it's giving us movement speed. We've got the knockback trait here, so every time a segment breaks, 50% movement speed, which just really helps out. And obviously the legendary effect there, when a segment breaks, we're getting immunity to damage for 2 seconds. So we're getting immunity to damage from our shield breaking every time an armor chunk breaks, and immunity to damage every time we use our force skill. So we're going to be getting a lot of immunity to damage, which is why we're basically immortal with this build, and it's just absolutely fantastic. This one you can find on Sludge Maw. We've talked about this every single time we mention Sludge Maw. I hate farming this guy. He can be found in Idolator's Noose district of the Fade Fields over here in the Waterworks area, and we hate farming him just because he spends most of the time underground. You're just standing about like a idiot just waiting for him to come up so you can actually damage him, but that's who you want to kill to try and get the onion here. You can sub this out for any shield that you choose as well, but that's the one that we've chosen here. And for the enhancements, we've just chosen a Maliwan one. So this one has got Mixologist on it, which is going to give us 10% bonus damage from the inactive element. So the good thing about this is that with the mantra, it's always going to come in 2 elements. So it's going to deal its primary element, 10% of its secondary element, and it's going to deal cryo from Berserk as well. So if you have 2 different elements in cryo on your mantra, it's actually going to deal 3 different types of elemental damage, which is just absolutely fantastic. The 3 traits we've got on there are status effect chance increased by 25%, shotgun reload speed, which will affect the mantra, and gun mag size, which is just an all-round good one as well. So this is just world loot, you can find this anywhere, and that wraps up all the gear that you'll need. So a lot easier to farm for this one, and we'll just touch on the firmware and then that's us. So for the firmware, we're choosing God Killer for 3 points. So this one is just a pretty good all-around buff to effectiveness against groups of enemies and bosses as well. For the 3 points, we're getting damage dealt increased to badass by 10%, damage taken from badasses is reduced by 10% for the 2nd points, and for the 3rd point, when we kill a badass, we're going to gain increased damage dealt overall by 20% for 60 seconds. So the 3rd point is really what's good about this one. So 60-second buff after killing a badass, and on Ultimate Vault Hunter 6 you're going to be killing badasses all the time, so this is just really damn nice. And for the other 2 points, we've chosen Real Big Fist. So again, just because we're dealing a lot of melee damage, it's not a melee build per se, or not in the typical sense, but these buffs really help out with the damage that we're going to be dishing out. So 50% melee damage for those 2 points there, and that is the firmware. So that wraps up the build, everything that you need to know. Give this one a shot, it is really quite interesting and unique. Like I said, not what I intended, but it turns out it's actually really goddamn strong, and yeah, hope you enjoy this one. Drop a comment down below as well with any feedback or suggestions. Really like to hear from you down there, and hope you found this helpful. Drop a like, subscribe if you're new here. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.